They say a mother's love can survive anything. But love dies quietly the moment your child steals from you and smiles while doing it. I didn't lose my son the day he emptied my bank account. I lost him the moment he looked at me and lied without flinching. It took me 55 years to understand something simple: blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty does, and when loyalty is gone, the sweetest revenge is silence. * My name is Margaret Cole. I live in a small town just outside Savannah, Georgia, a quiet street where the same mailman still greets me every morning, and where the sound of rain on the window feels louder than people's voices. I wasn't always alone. There was a time when this house echoed with laughter, burnt pancakes, and little feet running down the hallway. Back then, it was just me and my son Daniel when Daniel's father died. A construction accident on a stormy April morning. I made him a promise that no matter how hard life got, Daniel would never feel poor, or unloved, or left behind. And for the next 25 years, I kept that promise. I worked double shifts at the hospital cafeteria, sometimes 3. I wore secondhand shoes, drove a car older than him, and packed leftovers for lunch, but I never once touched the college fund I built for him. I still remember the day he graduated from medical school. He stood on stage in that blue robe, tall and handsome, the same dimpled smile he had as a boy. When they called his name, I cried so hard the woman next to me handed me a napkin. I thought to myself, he made it. He made it, and so did I. If someone had told me that same son would one day steal everything from me, I would have laughed, but betrayal doesn't arrive like thunder. It starts with silence. A change in tone. A missed call. A mother's instinct whispering that something isn't right. It began after he married Rachel. A woman with perfect hair, polished manners, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She was raised in a family that believed money could buy respect, and Daniel, he wanted so badly to belong. At first, I blamed myself for not fitting in. I wasn't like them. I didn't drink wine that cost as much as a week's groceries. I didn't wear pearls to dinner. I just showed up with my homemade casseroles, proud of the son who once said, "Mom, when I make it big, you'll never work again." But slowly, I began to feel the distance. Calls became texts. Texts became silence. And when I did hear from him, it was always rushed, distracted. Like a man trying to end a conversation that made him guilty. I remember the night it happened. A Wednesday. I was sitting at the kitchen table sorting through unpaid bills and old photographs when I logged into my bank account. It was routine, just to check the balance before paying property tax. And then I saw it. A single transfer. $184,327.00 gone. The sender's name, Daniel Cole. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. I refreshed the page again and again. It had to be a mistake. Some kind of banking error, but deep down, I knew it wasn't, because 3 days earlier, Daniel had called me out of nowhere. He'd asked for my online login details, said he needed to help me fix a tax issue. I gave them to him, trusting him completely. And now, my entire life savings, everything I'd ever earned, sold, or sacrificed, was gone. That night, I called him over 20 times. He didn't answer. By morning, his number was disconnected. When I called Rachel, her mother, Elena, picked up instead. She had that smug, careful tone rich women use when they're pretending to be polite. "Margaret, you should move on," she said softly. "Daniel's building a new life. You should be happy for him." I asked where he was. Her voice sharpened. "He's with his real family now." Real family. 2 words. Sharp enough to kill. I sat there in my kitchen until dawn, watching sunlight creep across the linoleum floor, realizing I didn't even know my own son anymore. And then, 2 days later, I saw it. The photo. Daniel and Rachel at a beachfront hotel in Miami, holding hands, champagne glasses raised. Behind them, her mother Elena, smiling. The caption read, "New beginnings." My heart didn't break that day. It froze, and in that stillness, something strange happened. I felt nothing. No tears, no screams, just silence. It was in that silence that a thought began to grow, quiet but sharp. If love could be stolen, maybe respect could be taken back. I started going through Daniel's old things: college letters, tax papers, loan forms. I found the property deed I had signed years ago. A small piece of land on the edge of town, worth barely anything back then, but now, with the new construction nearby, worth hundreds of thousands. I'd bought it in his name when he turned 18. He never knew. He thought it was just one of the many things his mother couldn't afford. But the funny thing about paperwork is, it remembers the truth. The name on that deed wasn't Daniel's, it was Margaret E. Cole, mine. That night, I stood by the window, holding that paper under the faint glow of the streetlight. Outside, the world looked peaceful, cars humming in the distance, rain beginning to fall softly. Inside, a storm was brewing, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't make noise, but changes everything when it hits, I whispered to myself. Almost like a prayer, you took what was mine, Daniel. But you forgot, what's yours was never really yours to begin with, and that's where it started. Not with anger. Not with shouting or police reports. But with something colder, smarter, a plan. A mother's plan, patient, invisible, inevitable because Daniel thought he'd destroyed me. But what he didn't know was that he'd just written the first chapter of his own downfall. Asterisk, they say revenge begins with rage. But that's not true. Rage is loud, and loud people make mistakes. My revenge began in silence. The kind that follows heartbreak. The kind that lets you see the world differently, like a photograph developing in the dark. For 3 weeks, I didn't speak to anyone. The neighbors thought I was sick. The mail piled up. But I wasn't dying. I was thinking, the woman who used to cry over her son's betrayal was gone. In her place was someone new. A woman who finally understood that love without respect is just weakness dressed in kindness. One morning, I went to the attic. The air was thick with dust and memories. I opened an old trunk, the one Daniel had once used to store his college notebooks. Inside were envelopes, documents, letters, things most people forget, but I had kept among them. I found something interesting, a loan contract Daniel had signed with Rachel's father. 5 years ago. It was small, $40,000, but the lender's name caught my eye. Graham Holdings, Inc., the shell company. I recognized the name because I'd seen it before on the receipts. Daniel had used to invest my savings. It all clicked. Rachel's family hadn't just married into my son's life. They'd bought him. They knew he was desperate to prove himself, and they used that desperation like a leash. I printed every document I could find, building a folder thick enough to break a desk leg. Then I drove to town. To Carter and Finch Law, the same firm that handled my husband's estate all those years ago. The lawyer, Mr. Finch, was older now, but his memory was sharp. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the papers with that lawyer's squint that always looks half judgment, half surprise. Mrs. Cole, he said slowly, do you realize what this means? I nodded, I do. But I want you to explain it anyway. He leaned forward. These are fraudulent transfers. Your son may have signed your name, but this, he tapped one page gently, is identity theft. And if what you're saying is true, that company, Graham Holdings, is laundering money through his accounts. I sat still. I didn't react. Because I already knew. Can you help me? I asked quietly. He looked at me for a long time. Maybe trying to decide if I was seeking justice or revenge. Finally, he said, yes, but you'll need proof, real proof. And patience, patience. That I had plenty of. For months, I watched from the shadows. Rachel's family held charity events, garden parties, and social dinners, always smiling, always pretending to be respectable. But I knew their secret. They weren't a family. They were a fawade. I started volunteering at the local foundation Rachel's mother ran, Elaine Graham Foundation. For women's wellness, pretty name, ugly truth. They used it to funnel donations into private accounts. They thought I was just an old woman helping at the registration desk. They didn't know I was taking photos of receipts, cross-checking signatures, forwarding documents to a private investigator. I wasn't loud. I wasn't cruel. I was careful. The kind of careful that scares people when they realize it too late. One night, after closing, I found Rachel alone in the office. She didn't notice me at first. She was on the phone, her voice sharp and impatient. Yes, transfer it before Monday. I don't care what he thinks. My name better not show up anywhere. When she hung up, I stepped into the doorway. She turned, startled. Oh, Mrs. Cole, you scared me. I smiled. Sorry, dear. I thought you'd gone home. Her expression softened, but only on the surface. She'd perfected the art of fake kindness. Just some last-minute work. You know how busy things get, of course, I said softly, setting my purse on the counter. It's good to see how much you care about the foundation. Your mother must be proud. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment. It was subtle, but I saw it. The crack. We do what we can, she replied quickly. I'm sure, I said. And I'm sure Daniel's proud too. He's lucky to have such capable women around him. That made her smile, a cold, satisfied smile. She turned away, busying herself with papers. She didn't notice me slip one of them into my bag, an invoice addressed to Graham Holdings. Ink dot proof, just a sliver, but enough to open a door back home. I sat at the table again, the same spot where I'd discovered my betrayal months ago. Only this time, I wasn't crying. I was smiling because I finally saw the bigger picture. Daniel wasn't the mastermind. He was the puppet. And if I wanted my revenge to mean something, I couldn't just punish him. I had to destroy the ones pulling his strings. The next day, I called Mr. Finch. It's time. I told him. Time for what? To make them remember who they stole from. That night, I stood by the window again. The rain tapping softly, the world quiet outside. In the reflection, I saw my face. Older, harder, but calm. My husband used to say, "Maggie, you're too kind for this world." He was wrong. Kindness is what made me dangerous. Because people like Rachel and her mother never saw it coming, a smile hiding a storm. And as I watched the city lights flicker in the distance, I whispered to the night, "You wanted my son, my money, my peace, fine, but I'll take back everything, piece by piece, starting with your name, *, revenge." I learned isn't about destruction. It's about patience, about knowing when to pull the thread so everything unravels on its own. And that time had finally come. It started with a letter. A plain white envelope, hand-delivered to Rachel's foundation. Inside was nothing but a copy of the invoice I'd stolen and a note written in elegant cursive. "You might want to check where your donations are really going." No name. No address. Just enough to light the first match. Within days, rumors began spreading. The local newspaper got wind of financial discrepancies. Rachel's mother, Elena, denied everything, of course, smiling for the cameras, insisting it was a misunderstanding, but behind the scenes, panic was spreading like wildfire. Daniel called me for the first time in months. The sound of his voice almost broke me. Almost. "Mom? Hey, I just wanted to check if you've seen the news. They're saying crazy things about Rachel's mom." I stayed calm. My heart was pounding, but my tone was steady. "Yes, I saw. I hope it's not true." "Of course it's not," he said quickly. "But people are talking and Rachel's really stressed. I might need to help her out financially for a while." I smiled to myself, softly, bitterly. "That's good of you, Daniel. Just be careful where your money goes." "Mom, please, not now. I'm just saying," I interrupted. "You wouldn't want to end up paying for someone else's sins." He sighed, frustrated, and hung up. But his voice trembled and I heard it. Fear. That was the first crack. A week later, I invited him to lunch. He came, looking tired, thinner, distracted. Rachel didn't come with him. She'd been feeling unwell, he said, when I placed his favorite dish on the table. He didn't even touch it. "Mom," he said quietly, "did you send anything to the foundation?" "What do you mean?" "Someone leaked internal documents. The police might investigate. Rachel's mother thinks it was someone inside." I looked him straight in the eye. "Daniel, I haven't stepped foot in that office in weeks." He studied me, searching for the truth. Or maybe for the version of his mother he used to know. But that woman no longer existed. I leaned forward slightly. "You should stay away from that mess, Daniel. Those people don't care about you. They never did." "That's not true, really?" I said softly. "Then why are you the one cleaning up their lies?" He didn't answer. He just looked down at his hands, the same hands that once held mine when he was a boy. Now they were shaking. That night, Rachel showed up at my door. No warning, no call. Just the sound of her heels clicking on my porch like tiny hammers of arrogance. When I opened the door, she didn't wait for an invitation. She walked right in, perfume thick as poison. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she said. I tilted my head. "I'm sorry, dear, you'll have to be specific." "I'm old, I forget things." Her eyes flashed with hatred. "Don't play innocent. I know you sent those files. You're trying to destroy my family." "Oh, honey," I said with a soft smile. "You don't need my help for that." Her face turned red. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Stay out of this. You have no idea what we're capable of." I met her stare without blinking. "Neither do you." For a moment, the silence between us felt like glass, fragile, dangerous. Then she turned sharply and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a long time, watching the curtain sway from the force of her anger. Then I whispered, "You shouldn't have come here, Rachel, because now." I knew exactly how to finish this. The next morning, I mailed another envelope, this time to the IRS Fraud Division. Inside was a full report of the Elaine Graham Foundation, complete with bank records, false invoices, and donation transfers. I didn't need to sign it. Truth speaks loud enough on its own. That night, I opened a bottle of wine, the same one I'd saved since my husband's funeral, and sat by the window. Outside, the world looked peaceful. But somewhere across town, Rachel's world was beginning to collapse. I could almost hear the cracks spreading through her perfect little kingdom. And for the first time in months, I whispered my husband's name softly into the night. "You were right, love. Some lessons can't be taught, only learned the hard way." Then I smiled. Because this was only the beginning. The storm hadn't even started yet. * You can't rush justice. It arrives when silence has done its work. By the time the investigation began, the town had already started whispering. The Elaine Graham Foundation, once the pride of the community, was under federal scrutiny. Donations frozen. Accounts seized. Reporters stationed outside the gates like vultures waiting for the fall. I didn't celebrate. Not yet, because I knew the real storm hadn't touched Daniel. Not until he saw what his loyalty had cost him. The call came one cold Friday morning. His voice was strained, breathless. "Mommy, it's bad." They raided Elaine's office. Rachel's terrified. We don't know what to do. I let a moment pass. Silence is powerful when used correctly. You should probably talk to a lawyer, Daniel. We can't afford one. Everything's frozen. The accounts, he stopped, realizing something. Wait, my accounts. Mom, the joint account I had with Rachel. It's gone. All of it. I closed my eyes. There it was. The sound of his world shattering. They took it, Daniel, I said quietly. You trusted thieves. You gave them everything, your savings, your name, your peace. He went silent. For almost a minute. When he finally spoke, his voice was small, like the boy he once was. What did I do, Mom? I wanted to hug him. I wanted to break. But I couldn't, not yet. You made a mistake, I said softly. Now you need to decide who you want to be, their puppet or your father's son. That night, he showed up at my house. It was raining, the way it always does when guilt needs to confess. He stood on my porch, soaked and trembling. I didn't know, he whispered. I swear to God, I didn't know what they were doing. I stepped aside and let him in. The living room still smelled like the vanilla candle I'd lit hours ago. The kind I used when he was little to make him feel safe. He sat down, head in his hands. Rachel said her mom was helping us invest. She said it was legal. I believed her. I didn't check anything. I just signed where she told me to. I poured him a cup of tea and placed it in front of him. You signed away your life, Daniel, I know, and mine. He froze. Looked up, eyes wide. What? I leaned forward, voice calm but steady. The account you emptied, that wasn't just savings. It was your father's retirement, my mortgage fund, my future. You took everything and you didn't even look back. He looked like he'd been hit. I didn't realize, Rachel said. Rachel lied. My tone cracked through the room like thunder. You believed her because it was easier than believing your own mother. You wanted to think I was bitter, jealous, controlling. But the truth, Daniel, is that I was protecting you from them. Tears filled his eyes. I ruined everything. No, I said softly. You just finally saw everything. Later that night, when he'd fallen asleep on the couch, I stood over him, the boy I raised, the man who broke me, the soul I still loved despite everything. I brushed a lock of wet hair from his forehead. He looked peaceful, almost innocent. But innocence doesn't erase consequence. That's when I heard the car outside. Rachel. She didn't knock this time. She just barged in, dripping anger and perfume. Where is he? She hissed. Sleeping, I said. You did this. You're the reason his life's falling apart. No, I replied quietly. You are. She took a step closer. You think you've won? You've destroyed him. Everything he worked for, everything you used him for, I corrected. Her voice cracked. He loves me. Then why did you take his money and hide it in your mother's offshore accounts? She froze. Just for a second, but enough. The shock, the flicker of realization that I knew. I smiled faintly. You really should have checked whose name was on the transfer files. Her mouth fell open. Fury and fear colliding. Yes, I interrupted, stepping closer. Me, the old woman you thought was blind. The mother you laughed at. I wrote those papers, Rachel. I kept the copies. Every signature. Every date. Every lie. For a moment, she looked like she might strike me. But she didn't. Instead, she turned and ran into the rain. Her heels slipping on the wet ground. I stood at the doorway, watching the taillights vanish into the dark, and that's when I realized something strange. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Daniel woke the next morning to a note on the kitchen table. It said, some debts can't be paid with money, but truth can buy you your soul back. He found me outside, sitting on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. I looked at him and said, you have one chance to fix this. Tell the truth, Daniel. To the police. To yourself. He nodded slowly. Tears again, but this time not from guilt. From release. And as the sun broke through the clouds, I saw my son again. Not the man who betrayed me, but the boy who once held my hand and promised he'd never hurt me. That was enough. For now, because the war wasn't over yet. Rachel and Elaine still thought they could bury me under their lies. But they'd forgotten I was the one who taught Daniel how to dig. Asterisk. It's strange how silence sounds right before the truth arrives. The morning it happened, the house felt heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his untouched coffee. The same boy who once used to draw stick figures on my grocery lists was now a man haunted by signatures and stolen trust. He looked at me, eyes hollow. They called. The FBI wants to meet. They said it's about the charity funds. I nodded, calm as a lake before a storm. You'll go, I said. And you'll tell them everything, Mom. If I tell them, Rachel and her mother will finally face the truth, I interrupted. And so will you. The drive to the federal office was quiet. Outside, the city looked the same, traffic lights blinking, people rushing to work. But for us, everything had changed. Daniel's hands trembled on the steering wheel. I still don't understand, he said softly. How did you even know what they were doing? I looked out the window, the reflection of his worried face flickering against the glass. Because I used to be one of them, I said quietly. He turned toward me. What? Before I married your father, I worked as a legal secretary in a property firm. I drafted hundreds of ownership contracts, transfer clauses, and hidden will amendments. People like Elena, they think no one reads the fine print. He stared at me, realization dawning. So when Rachel had me sign those papers, I recognized the language. I finished. It wasn't a partnership form. It was a release of rights. You weren't investing, you were surrendering. He went silent. His face changed, grief, anger, shame all folding into something new, acceptance. We reached the office. Agents met us in a stark white room, their expressions neutral but eyes sharp. Files stacked on the table. A laptop screen glowing with data that could ruin lives. They asked Daniel to sit. Then they turned to me. Mrs. Graham, we understand you might have additional information regarding these transactions. I nodded and handed over a sealed envelope. Inside, copies of every document Rachel and Elena had used, along with one key addition, a handwritten note from Elena's own assistant, confessing the fraudulent transfers. How did you obtain these? The lead agent asked. I used to be married to a lawyer, I replied calmly. I learned how to read between lies. The questioning lasted hours. By the end of it, Daniel looked drained but lighter, like a man walking out of his own shadow. As we stepped outside, he asked, do you think they'll arrest them? Not today, I said. But soon. Truth takes its time, he nodded, silent. The wind carried the smell of rain again. Always rain, as if the sky itself wanted to wash the past away. That evening, as I sat by the window, I got the call. A quiet, polite voice on the other end. Mrs. Graham, this is Agent Miller. We've obtained warrants for Elena Foster and her daughter Rachel Graham. Your cooperation was invaluable. For a moment, I didn't say a word. I just stared out at the setting sun, orange light reflecting off the wet pavement. Thank you, I finally whispered. When I hung up, the house was still. Too still, I looked at the old family photo on the mantel, me, my late husband, Daniel as a child, smiling with missing teeth. How far we'd drifted from that innocence. I traced the frame with my fingers and whispered, you can rest now, Richard. He's coming back to us. Later that night, Daniel came to me, eyes red. They took them. Rachel and her mom. It's all over the news, I nodded slowly. And you? He swallowed hard. They said I'll have to testify, but they don't see me as guilty, just lost. He sat beside me, and for the first time in months, he reached for my hand. I'm sorry, Mom, I know. You must hate me. I turned to him, really looked at him, my son. The one who fell for lies but came back for truth. No, Daniel, I said softly. I don't hate you. I hate what they made you believe. He broke down then, the kind of cry that doesn't come from the eyes but from the soul. And I let him. I held him. Because revenge, for me, had never been about destroying anyone. It was about healing what was left. When he finally fell asleep on the couch again, I stood by the window and watched the rain. Headlights passed outside. The world kept moving, unaware that a quiet war had just ended. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was precise, patient. And just that Rachel had taken everything from me, my savings, my son, my peace. But I had taken something far greater from her, the illusion of power. And when the illusion dies, everything else follows. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in the armchair and whispered to the empty room. Justice doesn't need noise. It only needs time. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, echoing softly through the night. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to smile. Asterisk, the town didn't talk about the Fosters for long. People move on quickly when they're not the ones who bled. News channels shifted to news scandals, reporters found new faces to chase. And soon the headlines that once screamed charity fraud exposed faded into archived memory. But inside my home, silence stayed, not heavy anymore, just still. Like the air after a storm has passed and everything smells of rain and forgiveness. Daniel moved back for a while. Not out of guilt, out of need. He helped repaint the house, fixed the broken porch light, mowed the lawn that had grown wild in the months I stopped caring. One afternoon, as we packed away old files and papers, he asked softly, "Why didn't you tell me what you were planning, Mom?" I smiled faintly. "Because if I had, you might have tried to stop me." He looked down. "I wouldn't have believed you." Exactly, we both laughed. The kind of laugh that doesn't erase pain, but softens its edges. Weeks passed. The garden bloomed again, the same roses Richard had planted years ago. Daniel started working with a local outreach group, using his accounting skills to help small businesses recover from fraud. He was rebuilding quietly, and I was learning how to live without anger. It's strange, when revenge ends, what remains isn't victory. It's emptiness at first, then peace, and then understanding, because I realized something. I wasn't avenging money. I was avenging memory. The memory of a family that once meant everything. One evening, I drove to the lake. The one Richard used to take us to when Daniel was a child. The air was cool, the water still. I sat on the old bench. The same one where I'd once watched my husband teach Daniel how to skip stones. A soft breeze brushed past me, carrying faint echoes of laughter I could almost remember. And for a moment, I wasn't Margaret Graham, the betrayed mother or the quiet avenger. I was just a woman who had loved, lost, and learned to stand again. I took out a letter, one I'd written months ago but never sent. It was addressed to Richard. You always said truth has a voice of its own. You were right. I didn't have to scream. I just had to wait. Daniel finally knows who he is. The money's gone, but peace has returned. And as I sit here, watching the sun go down, I think I finally understand what forgiveness means. It's not forgetting. It's remembering. Without pain, I folded the letter and let the wind take it. It fluttered once, twice, and drifted gently across the lake until it vanished in the mist. When I got home, Daniel was waiting by the door. He looked different now, older, steadier, softer. You okay? He asked. Better than I've been in years. He smiled, that same crooked smile from his childhood. Dad would have been proud of you. I looked at him, eyes shining in the porch light. No, Daniel, I said softly. He'd be proud of us. We stood there in silence, listening to the crickets, the hum of night, the quiet music of healing, and as I turned to go inside, I thought of something I'd once heard, that sometimes justice doesn't come like thunder. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper that says, you can rest now. I closed the door behind me, leaving the world and its noise outside. The house was warm, peaceful. I poured a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the rain begin again. It wasn't a storm this time. Just rain, soft, rhythmic, cleansing. I smiled, because after all the pain, all the lies, and all the years I spent waiting, I had finally taken back everything I'd lost. Not the money, not the house, but my soul, and that, I realized, was the only thing worth owning. Asterisk, if the story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video. It really helps me bring you more stories like this. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your own child betrayed you? And if you believe truth always finds its way, share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for listening. This was Voice of Elena.